Imagine discovering that one of the most important aircraft used during the World War I aviation history was partly designed by an engineer from Bangalore. Not from America, not from Germany, not from Britain, but from Bengaluru, India. And yet, almost nobody in India knows his name. When people talk about the Indian aviation history, they usually remember one pioneer, J.R.D. Tata. But decades before India even had a civil aviation industry, another Indian engineer was already working on the aircraft design at the heart of global aviation revolution. His name was Sriram Venkatasubba Setty, and his forgotten story connects Bengaluru to one of the most important aircraft of World War I. To understand how extraordinary this story is, we need to go back to early 1900s when aviation itself was still experimental. Aircraft were fragile machines made of wood and fabric. Engines failed often, crashes were common. Pilots were basically test subjects for the new technology. At that time, engineers around the world were racing to solve the biggest mystery of modern science: how to make controlled flight stable and safe. Just a few years earlier, the Wright brothers had proven that the powered flight was possible, but the world still didn't know how to build a reliable aircraft. During this exciting but dangerous era of aviation experimentation, a young engineering student from Bengaluru decided to travel thousands of kilometers to study engineering in London. Sriram Venkatasubba Setty studied engineering at Faraday House in London, one of the respected engineering institutions of that time. But unlike many graduates who pursued stable industrial jobs, Setty was fascinated by the newest and the riskiest technology of the era: aircraft engineering. Soon after completing his studies, he joined one of the earliest aircraft manufacturing companies in the world called Avro and Company. Today, the name Avro is legendary in aviation history, but at that time, the country was still experimenting with aircraft designs, trying to figure out how to make planes safer, faster, and more controllable. Setty became one of the engineers contributing to this early phase of the aircraft innovation. Working at Avro means being at the front line of aviation engineering. Engineers were constantly experimenting with the wing structures, balance, control systems, and aerodynamics. Small design improvements could determine whether an aircraft flew successfully or crashed within minutes. Setty contributed to improving the aircraft stability and structure design, helping the company refine its aircraft models. Over the time, these improvements evolved into a particular aircraft that would become one of the most widely produced planes of its time, the famous Avro 504. This aircraft would later become one of the most important training aircraft used during the World War I, helping thousands of pilots learn how to fly. The Avro 504 became one of the most produced aircraft during World War I aviation training. Military forces needed a reliable plane to train the new pilots quickly, and the Avro 504 turned out to be perfect for that purpose. Thousands of pilots learned their first flying lessons in this aircraft. Thinking about that for a moment. During one of the largest conflicts in the world history, the aircraft helping to train the pilots had designed contributions from an engineer who originally came from India. At a time when aviation technology was dominated by the Western countries, an Indian engineer was already part of the global innovation ecosystem shaping the future of flight. After his time working in Britain's aviation industry, Setty eventually returned to India. His journey then brought him back to Bengaluru, where he became associated with one of the city's most respected engineering institutions, University Visvesvaraya College of Engineering. For decades, thousands of students have studied engineering at this institution, walking through its classrooms and corridors while preparing to build careers in technology, innovation, and industry. But many of them may not realize that the college was once associated to one of India's earliest pioneers in aircraft engineering, a man who had worked at the center of global aviation innovation during early 20th century. Today, Bangalore is known around the world as India's technology capital, famous for startups, software companies, and aerospace research organizations. But the city's connection to global innovation didn't begin with Silicon Valley-style tech companies. More than 100 years ago, a young engineer from this city was already helping shape the aircraft design during one of the most important periods in aviation history. Stories like this remind us that the Indian engineers have been contributing to the global technology revolution for generations, even when their names slowly faded out from the public memory. Sometimes the most fascinating stories are not the ones printed in textbooks. Sometimes they are hidden in the forgotten chapters of history, waiting to be rediscovered. And the story of Sriram Venkatasubba Setty reminds us that India's legacy of innovation has been flying high for more than a century. If you enjoy discovering forgotten stories, please subscribe.